Hello, everyone, to this new live mentalism conversation. Today, we are with a very, very special guest that I had the pleasure to meet just online in normal conversations, but now we can see each other. I am in Chile, you are in the other countries, in continents, right? So for me, it's a very, very beautiful opportunity to say welcome, Luch, to this live mentalism conversation. How are you, my friend?
Oh, thank you very much for having me on, Pablo. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. And again, very happy to be in this moment with this conversation. And as always, this conversation is obviously part of Mentalism Center, mentalism, but let's go whenever we want and whenever we feel that the community can receive some insights, some interesting ideas to ponder. So let's go, first of all, with maybe an observation about the state of the art of mentalism at this day. How do you feel, Luch, that mentalism is today?
Wow, what a question to start on. I mean, it's such a vast arena to navigate. I think if you look at it from two different points of view, so we're looking at it from the point of view as going out and performing for the public and their perception of mentalism, whereas the perception of mentalism from being within the community vastly differs. You know, one doesn't care; they've seen something and this exists. This is either amazing or it's for me or it's not. Whereas if you're involved in the community, it can absorb and consume. So how do I feel about it? I feel that in the past 20 years, let's say, there has been a massive boom, which kind of petered off a little bit. And then within this new generation, there has been, additional spikes in creativity in different areas that I might not be that familiar with or well versed in, but also in the classics as well. The ideas, the tried and tested ideas from years gone, with people building on them. So it almost feels like there is two kind of communities or two areas within mentalism now that beforehand it wasn't there. So yeah, I find it interesting. And also that the demographics who are within each, let's say, area of that community. I find that it tends to be the younger generation in one, and I always felt young, but I'm 41 now, so I'm starting. I've got to accept that I'm getting into the older generation.
41, really?
Yeah, crazy. It was my 41st birthday, literally 4 days ago. So
I thought that you were like 30 something. Your
no,
your face is very young. Yeah, nice.
I was using moisturizer in my 20s. I think that's what did it.
Yeah, the good life. Yeah. Very good point, Luke. I think that, and also I also feel that it's very important to recognize both the tradition and the innovation, right? Sometimes with a more dualistic type of choice, this or that, we miss the point that advancement is in the balance, and tradition is fundamental in a very true sense. And so any student of mentalism, any interested one who is entering now, is very needed to study the classics, Bob Cassidy, Corinne, Anneman, and so on, of course. But I feel, and especially in my experience as the founder of Mentalism Center and watching the movement, I see so many young and beautiful contributions that are in a way so connected to the dynamics of the modern society. And what I mean by that, for example, one of the lines of that is Propless. And I don't worship Propless. I think that is valid, is good, is great. It's not best as prop based, but it's nice. But the interesting thing is that there are some very young creators that are understanding language as a technique, right? And obviously one of the greatest in the Propless, Fraser Parker, Peter, and all that group, but particularly Fraser does something very interesting in his latest works about language, about words, about timing. So in a way, they are understanding that language, that communication is a method, right? It's a way to achieve this mysterious event with the mind. So how do you feel about this work of Propless, your own experience with props? How do you see that?
Well, over the years, I've been exposed to a wide range of it, either through being sent ideas, purchasing ideas, or being shared them with friends who I've watched perform them. And the one thing I noticed is that there was such a vast spectrum of success rate. Some seem to be a lot more surefire, let's say, than others, and others seem to be ideas that, okay, they're ideas that should be marinated and just thought on for a while and see where they go, as opposed to sometimes feel that they may be a little bit rushed to market. So I don't use that much on what's been termed propless mentalism in my act. But at the same time, I'm aware that when I look at things like Banachek's Psychological Subtleties books, to me, those kind of things are the origins of Propless, if that makes sense. And I remember having a conversation with Peter Nardi years ago, and we were talking about some of the material that he'd been receiving at Al-Kazam for consideration of being released, sent to be going into this direction of not using anything, but not for the sake of, like, you know, that the compromise of, shall we get someone to write something down, or what's the process? Sometimes it's just being propless for the sake of being propless, just to say it's being propless, when maybe that's not the best method for that particular environment or routine, who knows. But he said to me something interesting, was the way he sees these kind of ideas are, they are your seasonings. If you're a chef, you have a cupboard with all your seasonings and all your spices, and you cook up something that you know is a solid base for something, whether it's stock, whether I don't know why I'm using cooking as a metaphor, but it kind of. But then it's all about the peppers and the seasoning, just to add a little bit of variety and uniqueness to it. And he kind of said that's how he sees Propless. If you have a classic fundamental method that you know will work, but then dress it up with a little bit of spice from some of these ideas pertaining to the psychology, that's where you get a well-rounded routine, let's say. And at the time I was like, yeah, completely agree with it. And I still agree with that, because it's, you know, it's sound thinking. But there's been such a progression of ideas over the years, where I'm watching people. I remember watching Atlas Brookins years ago with his train tracking. And I was gobsmacked. I haven't seen Atlas for years. I haven't seen him for, what are we on, 2021? I don't think I've seen him for 5 years. So I have no idea whether he's still performing. But watching him do that was like watching someone with a computer for a brain, processing the information in real time to then feed back the only possible word it could be, because he's programmed it. That to me was a demonstration of, like, incredible processing and memory. That's what it looks like, as opposed to a piece of mind reading. It's almost like a piece of maths programming you're watching, where it's filled in all the possible combinations, and this, which to me, a human being, what can do that in itself is an incredible skill to witness. And watching it hit not just the odd time, but seeing him hit time after time. We shared a card journey bike from the South Tyneside Festival. It was a magic festival that he was lecturing at, and we were doing a stage performance together where we were testing some twin person act that we'd been working on at the time, and we were just showcasing that. And the drive back was probably 3 hours, maybe, in the car, 2.5 hours. And I must have tried it on him a dozen times, one after the other. And he was like a machine. He just didn't get it wrong. And I was trying to go for words that were, you know, stupid, like words that you wouldn't necessarily associate. We were going over, we're on the motorway. There was a big concrete overpass bridge. So I thought the word overpass, and then I saw like the word bollard with concrete bollards on, and yet he was still nailing them. So to see that kind of level of it with nothing written down was
Yeah. Or
amazing.
maybe he just watch you the word, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
more easy.
I'm just
I
putting
will
everything
do that.
to the road, concrete.
Yeah.
Oh. So yeah, on that side of it, it was amazing to see it. And then I invested a lot of time to learn part of train tracking. I remember, I don't think I'm revealing too much, but there's certain tracks that you learn. I think it's 3 stages, and I was learning one of them in order to sort of get myself out there and try and learn it in the real world, where I'm surrounded by people. I've got music playing, people are drinking, and whether they can process it all. And very quickly for me, it became apparent that I couldn't use this type of technique in the environments that I perform in, just because either one, my communication is not clear enough, which sometimes it might not be, sometimes it is, it's hit and miss. But at the same time, the outside distractions of music being played, typically if it's a corporate event or if it's a wedding or a party, it's loud. I'm fighting to be heard. And this is obviously in a mingling capacity. I would never attempt to do it on stage. I have my stage show what has its own elements built in, what allow for improvisation. I don't want to dedicate a 10-minute spot to something that I would potentially mess up. But yeah, for him, brilliant. For me, not so much. And since then, when I've bought things or I've invested in things to learn, I find that after everything, I still do the routines that I'm working on that come from within. Do you know what I mean? And that comes from, I think, a basis of passion for the people who've come before, who I've learned and studied and have mentored me. And I almost feel that I owe it to them to develop my own work, how they develop theirs. So I have my own processes for creativity and for developing ideas. And I'm naturally pulled towards physical, practical methods. And it's probably because of university, I studied design. So I like to understand how things work. And I draw and I sketch and I think of ideas that way. I'm a very visual person. So I think that's probably where my love of mentalism is and will always be. Although I'm now, as I get older, I'm more open to the possibility of, yeah, let's take this idea and see if we can work it with what we've already got, and see where it takes us. So I hope that kind of makes some kind of sense. I feel like
Hopefully, for me, that and your first book is simple and direct, right?
Yeah, simple and direct mentalism. Sad.
Yeah.
So that is now, wow, I think it's 15 or 16 years old when that first came out. But it had been written over a period of about 3 years beforehand. So some of those routines now, 20 years old. And I was just mid-20s, just doing my thing, not really performing, not in a professional sense. I was teaching, so I was performing for the young people, and I was learning things that way, and I would do the odd private party. And it was about that time that I was living in Nottingham, I'm still in Nottinghamshire, but the city of Nottingham is about 40 minutes away now. And I was contacted by the radio who were doing a promotion, and they were doing a promotion with a wedding company, like an events company that specializes in putting on weddings. And it was called the Runaway Bride. And what the competition is they had 3 potential brides who wanted to get married, and they were given £10. So what's it, $15 or whatever that monetary value is back then, and they had to get as far away from Nottingham on that £10 within 24 hours. And whoever got the furthest away was the runaway bride. They won the free wedding with everything free. But the reason why I got a phone call for that is because they wanted to know if I wanted to be a part of the promotion and donate my show to their wedding as part of the prize. So I ended up doing that. There was like car companies that brought Rolls Royces, and they would drive them to the wedding and back. So it was in style, a free dress, all the cakes, all the menswear and groomswear. So basically, I think the package was probably in the region of maybe £50,000. And that was the prize for getting as far away. Now, the winner actually got really far away. I think it was about 3,000 miles away. They managed to get to the airport and blag the 3 flights and what have you. So that was good fun. But that at that time when I wrote Sad, that's when I was just starting to really perform close up. Not really stage work or not really any parlor work. I'd done a bit, but it was more like in front of 10 people, let's say, as opposed to being hired by a corporate to come in. So that, I would say probably about 4 years. So from 2005 to 2010 were those kind of years where I was learning about performing close up. And by the end of sort of 2009, 2010, that's where I was doing not a hell of a lot of shows, but I was doing regular work, you know, maybe a couple of times a month, just doing either a wedding or, you know, a Christmas party or something like that. And at the time I was still teaching. And with teaching, it kind of got to the point where over the years, I was working 5 days a week teaching and performing whenever I could. Might have been during the weekends or some evenings. It was typically on a Friday or maybe a Saturday with the shows. But eventually the inquiries came more and more in as I developed the business. I, you know, make sure everyone got business cards, word of mouth started to come around. And I was doing some radio appearances on BBC Nottingham. And just naturally it grew over time. And then I remember I took a corporate event in Spain, and I've been flown to La Manga, which is a golf resort. Now I don't play golf. I don't know anything about golf, but I know golf is money for a lot of corporations, and a lot of meetings are decided on the golf course. So it's a whole new arena to me. I didn't feel comfortable at all. But the brief that I got is when you get there, you see this lady who's booked you in. She'll take you around, and it's the day after your performance. So I was there for 3 days in total, and I performed for about an hour out of the whole 3 days. It was crazy. But I remember the fee was just crazy, you know, to be flown. I mean, I had to do nothing literally from the moment I left the house. A car picked me up, took me to the airport. A car waited for me, took me to the venue. Everything was laid on, and I'd earn, you know, two to 3 months worth of regular income. So it blew my mind. But I remember being there at the time, and I had to, in order for me to take this gig, I had to call in sick at work. And it was just this awkward moment where I couldn't do it ahead of time because they would say, why are you calling in sick 24 hours before you're due to come in, like on the Sunday? So what I had to do is when I landed that evening, I still hadn't called in. It was the morning after, which they were expecting me in work in a couple of hours, and I had to ring in, but they didn't answer. And I was like, shit, I can't even leave a message. Because it's a secure unit. It was like a prison where I worked, so you had to filter all the calls through. So as I hung up and I was thinking about what am I going to do, I thought I'll just give it another hour. My phone rang and it was work, but I realized as soon as they called me, they would have had the international dial tone, so my phone would have sounded different, and they know that I'm not even in the country. So I just said, oh yeah, I'm not going to be in today. And he went, okay. I said, I'm probably not going to be in tomorrow neither. I feel really bad. They knew. So I had to have this honest conversation with them, and they basically allowed me to go down from a full 5-day contract, Monday to Friday, to essentially a 3-day contract.
Nice.
So 3 days, still got paid by them, but it allowed me to then go and pursue the career.
Nice.
And it was their support really what helped facilitate transition, because the transition went not just from teaching to gigging, it did this.
Nice.
It allowed the business to grow, and that was that really. So
yeah, beautiful, so that was me. Beautiful stuff. Yeah,
simple and direct. 2006.
Yeah, you know, and what is great about the power of the word simple, right? And when I first saw your book, I was very astonished for the fact that someone was embracing simplicity, right? Because I love simplicity as a value even before mentalism. and as a musician, as a guitarist, I also understand simplicity from that musical type of understanding. And when I entered to magic and mentalism and so on, I also as well had this sensitivity to the what is simple, and I felt that especially in my beginnings when I started performing, I realized that I don't need it. I didn't need those special products or the gimmicks or whatever, right? They are tools, they are great, but there's a magic in simplicity. And when I saw your book, Simple and Direct, I say, nice. This is someone that is not saying simple but powerful, for example, right? It's not the but, it's the and. And in my first book, compendium book, Simple Mental, I also take that route in the understanding that, yeah, this is simple. And that is why it's so important to put power into that simplicity in order to become a beautiful experience, right? Because it's not, simplicity is not about just doing something quick or something in a light way or even not important. It's the contrary. It's understanding that the tools, the techniques that we have are simple, right? If we want to explain someone how is this mind reading, knowing the thought of someone, yeah, he saw the paper. What? How? No, right? That that is so simple. But the beautiful aspect is to understand how to camouflage that simple secret into a much deeper experience in which even the physical prop is not part of the experience. It's not the focus, right? And I also mentioned that because you had a recent product, the Blink case, right? And it's very simple. It's not very high technology, and it doesn't need to be, right? And from my experience also in the performance, in the professional sense, because I don't consider myself a full professional because I also do psychology and another things, but I always value what is truly workable, practical, a true tool. It's not that I reject the electronic innovations and so on, but there are so many options and tools that we can choose depending on of our own style. And personally, I prefer simple, right? So how do you see particularly this new case that you have available in this notion of simplicity and practical and workable?
Well, the whole idea of simplicity for me is it's not necessarily if you look at the opposite, you look at something what's complicated and complex and has lots of different facets to it. You take away some of those facets, then you're making it simpler. But
Yeah,
often you don't replace those things. It's just the opposite. So it's like
yeah,
negative space or silence,
yeah,
and using that power of silence to make the routine. Just because it's simple in terms of the method or the mechanics doesn't mean that the whole experience is simple.
yeah,
Do you know? Does that make sense? So I think often it's what we don't do and what we don't say, and we allow the audience to think or just room to think about something or to breathe or to
yeah,
digest what that's why I like the simplicity of it. Someone said to me years ago that if you make the audience think, no, what is the term? You make them think that they are thinking. So if they're sat there and oh, do you know what? I've never thought about that's really clever. Then they will love you for it because you're teaching them without teaching them. You're educating them without labeling it. But if you actually stop and make them think, then they will resent you for it because you're taking them out of the experience and they have to use their brain. So for me, any routine shouldn't lose their focus. It should be, if we are going, if the goal is to duplicate a drawing, let's say, then what's the point in all the other processes? Have an image constructed, whether it's in their head or whether it's on the paper, whether that's in their head first and then on the paper, then duplicate, or whether it's just straight onto the paper. You've got to find what's simple and what's direct for
yeah,
your character, for your process. So anything that I release or design, let's say, will be for one reason only, and that is because I want it myself for a routine. And that's one of the things that we talk about with Phil Smith, because he does some of the design work for me, like especially the logos, the packaging and things like that. But I will also bounce ideas off him. I'll say, what do you think of this? And the one thing he's always said is that the reason why I think your products are popular is because they are released with one goal in mind, and that is because you want to use it as a tool. You had this idea and you're sharing it with it. And I thought, well, it makes sense with Read My Mind with the company, because I don't sell to other companies. I don't wholesale. I just have small batches made for myself and customers, because I do want to share them. But at the same time, I don't want to just have 1,500 or 2,000 of them out and everyone gets one, because then where's the specialness about it? I think there is something within the idea of creating something and having it being a physical manifestation of your creativity is very important. And I think it should be special. It shouldn't be trivialized by making it widely arranged. It's just me. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be the biggest best-selling magic creator of all time. I just want to create products that are good for me and that are popular and live by that simple and direct ethos. I think it was Ray Charles that said years ago that he never wanted to be famous. He just wanted to be great at what he did. And that's kind of how I feel about it. So with the Blink case, the very first Blink case that I created was, we had Blink, then Blink 2. And the very first one, I was just walking on a market stall. And I was looking at leather wallets and belts and things like that. And I didn't have anything in mind. I was just absent-mindedly walking along, and I saw one with a patch on the front. And I kind of remembered Mark Striving's SUC, when it had the stitches that created the illusion that something is stitched down, but it's not. And then I thought, well, that is stitched on there, but what if it wasn't stitched on? What if it could move? And that's where the idea came. And then some people liked the look of it. It worked really, really well. But there was a minority that didn't like the aesthetic, the design choice. They didn't like the patch, which, okay, not everyone's going to buy a belt buckle with a big thing on it. It's certain people, certain types of products. So the idea with Blink is to release a family of wallets, let's say over the years, that are still built around the same simple peak, but tick a range of different boxes in terms of aesthetical tastes. So that's where we're at with the latest one, which is more of a modern, minimalistic kind of business card design. I know most people have seen it in the sort of vertical kind of portrait landscape sort of. I think the original one was landscape and this one's portrait, but yeah, I could have made a wallet that did everything. It could have had an index in there, it could have had an out to lunch, it could have had 6 different peaks, but what's the point? I don't want to turn up to a gunfight with a tank. And plus, if anything, it hinders you. All this extra things that have been forced in there isn't something that's organically grown out of an idea. We've heard of don't be a jack of all trades, master of none. I just wanted a peak wallet because that's what I wanted. So I want to come up with something that did the peak in a way that I wanted it to work, and worked every single time, with no fuss. So that's the idea behind Blink. But since then, an unlikely kind of partnership transpired with us, because I kind of feel like I've known you for years, like we're friends, but we just never met up before.
Of course.
Thousands of miles away. But then, Alan Wong, who's, and this is mainly for the benefit of the people what won't know, Alan Wong is the guy that I turn to for when I want leather making, and is the guy you turn to for when you want something leather making. And I think this was the 3rd prototype when we got to this color choice, which is like a chocolate leather, and it's actually a gunmetal colored stitching. So it's like a dark graphite colored stitching. And he had it, and he was saying, I really, really like the color choice that you've gone with, and the whole design just looks fresh and modern. And I'm thinking about whether it's possible to, and then he asked for permission, like, can we use your design in terms of the angled cuts and the chocolate leather and the stitching for your USD.
Universal, USD 3.0, I think,
And I've heard of it, but I'd never seen one, never had one in one hand. And then he sent it to me a while back, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the kind of thing that you want to get in a set, you know, like a box
Yeah,
set.
of
You open
course,
it up,
yeah,
look at this.
yeah,
And they're just perfect. So like, if you haven't seen them, like, this is Alan and Pablo's Universal Switch Device 3, isn't it? It's the
yeah,
third one.
yeah,
And it's exactly the same leather. It's the same stitching, same factory. So they literally look like they just belong together.
yeah,
And very, very thin as well.
yeah.
So match made in heaven. And it's not something we planned to do. It's just an opportunity that came along one day. We said yes to, and now look, people can get two products that just look amazing together. It's great. I think whoever picks up both of them are going to be in for a treat. Really, it's
Yeah.
yeah. And I think if anything, it just opens the awareness that lots of other creators could maybe do this. Do you know what I mean? Instead of competing all the time, why don't you, get together and just
Why
create
not?
some.
Yeah, of course, of course. Sadly, we are so full of ego, so full of, as you said, fame and whatever. And it's time now to start to cultivate this other side, which is not the panacea, is not the heaven, but it's the balance, right? And I feel also in what you said about simplicity and complexity and this balance. I think that most importantly, even if the method that we are using is complex, we can have this kind of inner complexity, but in the outer experience of the performance, it always must feel simple for the audience, right? So, what is great about these simple methods is that they allow, in a very open way, to have simple performance. But the problem with complex methods is that we need to be very aware of all the complexities, and sometimes that takes our conscious mind, right? And it's kind of counterintuitive because if we want to truly perform in a quality and in an excellent way, we need to have this practice, this rehearsal in our unconscious. We need to do it as automatically, right? So we don't need to think about that. And that's kind of a classic line for ad copies, right? You don't need to think that's everything for you or whatever. But in the most important aspect, as you said, showing also in a very physical way both products, is that this type of simple method offer the opportunity for you to create simple experiences. And in my case, the universal switch device, or also the universal pick device, which is kind of similar, but as you said, the main goal was to create, in the methodological sense, a pick, right? And why I want to use a pick to create telepathic experience with someone. So I ask someone to draw something, a number, a word, name, whatever. But this is not the relevant aspect, right? And what I love as well of these designs is that we can use them in such a casual way that truly our audience will not remember the use of the physical prop, because in a true sense is so simple in the visual aspect that it's not very memorable, right? And I love that because it's almost invisible. And especially if we don't place our focus into, okay, you need to write things, no, just casual, right? As in any type of conversation, when someone writes something, and it's just a physical action, it's not very needed of justification, right? And that's a very kind of uh, counterintuitive action that some performers take, that in order to use a pig wallet or justify the written procedure, they need to talk and talk and talk. And with that type of focus, people say, okay, why is he placing so much attention? Maybe it's that, and they start to think, right, about the trick and all that. So I love that, as you said, we are in this kind of indirect collaboration, but not that indirect as well, because we are coming from this value of simplicity. In your case, from your design experience, in my experience from psychology and other types of studies, that allows us to understand that simple is good. It's not something that we need to renegade or deny, right? But the temptation is to fall into the simpler, right? And Einstein said, I love that we need to be as simple as possible, but not simpler, right? It's like that we need to find the balance in order to truly create the use of the tool, but understanding as a tool is not the final goal to use it properly. Of course that we need to use it properly, but that's the beginning to something, right? For what? For the performance, for the interaction. So I love that we find this space, common space of simplicity and workable materials, because eh, we need different products, different authors, different creators, and you mentioned Atlas. Atlas, of course, that he finds, in my view, that method and that book and that work kind of a Magnus, right, work, like the great work of someone. And I feel that we both offer also in the community the value of simplicity, that that being simple is important, but it's not enough. We need to apply the power, apply the presence of the performance, the mysteries, and find that they are workable. They are truly tools to create experiences for people that maybe they will not forget, right? And sometimes for us it's so common. Yeah, I read minds, I predict futures or whatever, but for people can be a very even transformational experience. And I don't expect that. It's not my goal, but hearing some people performing and create conversation, hearing what is their feedback, they are showing that the experience, and it's not about me, it's not about anyone, it's about the experience. The experience is something truly different, and we can, why not, we can share with someone a moment of wellness, a moment of a smile, right, in this time of pandemic, and all this is so needed to share a little bit of our light, our contribution, our art, right, our the potential of the novelty of an experience, right? That's kind of beautiful thing to see in mentalism, in magic as well, and in anything really. But particularly in what we do is that we can, in a way, enhance the novelty of a moment, and remind people that every moment can contain magic, mystery, or something curious, at least, right?
There's the potential to, yeah, every moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
without a doubt. It's funny because you almost break it down. It's almost like on a spiritual level, isn't it? It feels it's an understanding of how powerful mentalism can be if you find the right balance between why it's done and how it's done, and the impact that it can have. I mean, I remember years ago, and more recently, because as time goes on, I find that I focus more on not necessarily what I'm doing, but how I'm interacting with the audience. The show becomes about them as opposed to me stood at the front presenting, whereas it wasn't like that years ago. And that's when I was more nervous, when I thought it was about me. As you develop,
very good. Yeah,
it's not about you. The nerves tend to go. But I remember the impact and the variety of impact in terms of the differentiation between how some people can view it and experience what it is that you do and how other people do. And often we don't get that pleasure of being able to listen afterwards to find out what people think.
Yeah.
But I remember being followed back to my car. I parked up at the venue, and there was a woman that was, I don't know if you ever told you this or if you've heard this before, but there was a woman watching me from afar. And peripherally, I was aware she was there, but she never actually got involved. And whenever I would turn to face her, she would go off. But as I was leaving, I had my case and I put my coat on and I got my car keys and I was just heading out. And I remember it was a cold night because it was frosty on the floor and I could hear the footprints. And I stopped and there was this woman there was sort of following me out, and I could see that she was really nervous, let's say, but emotional at the same time. And she was, I could see the tears in her eyes. So I asked her if everything was all right, and then she just burst out crying. And apparently her friend had, how can I describe it? She's terminally ill with, I think it was a form of leukemia, and she was in a hospital, and they tried every type of medicine and processes and treatments that they could provide, let's say. I don't know if it was exhaustive or not, but at this point, she was just given a matter of days to live. And a friend, by seeing my close-up performance, which was revealing names, revealing drawings, a dice, and a deck of cards.
Yeah.
But somehow it had spoken to her on a level where she felt that I could go to the hospital and do something to help. And, you know, it was the most gut-wrenching experience to think that I can't believe that I've given you the impression.
Yeah.
And that makes me sad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've given you some kind of hope that I didn't know that I'd given you. So then it got worse trying to explain that I'm an entertainer, because now I'm insulting her intelligence and her confidence to come and speak to me. So in the end, I was like, I just don't know what I can do. You know what I mean? I felt awful. And I had to then address immediately, not my moral compass, but what am I communicating when I perform? Yeah. What is it what you are seeing? Because if you are thinking it's something else, then I'm doing the wrong job, because that's not what I want. So at that point, I think it was, I mean, I'm a huge comic book fan, as you can probably tell with all the paraphernalia and collectibles, but it was always reminding me of Spider-Man when he said, with great power becomes great responsibility. Yeah. And at that point, I made the conscious effort to, whatever I present must be communicated through a process of what I'm doing, as opposed to it could be a higher power. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So now I appreciate that opens up the conversation of, well, is one any worse than the other? If you're telling people that you're doing this through psychological means, is this ethically any different to doing it as a higher spiritual means? Yeah. Well, one wouldn't have given this lady the false hope. So in that sense, it would have solved that problem. But I appreciate that there is a conversation to be had there, without a doubt. But since then, I've just been a little bit more like, do you know what? This is just a bit of entertainment. You might be able to spot how I'm doing some of this, or the others, might not, which is fine, because it's just meant to be a mystery. It's meant to be fun. Yeah. I kind of encompassingly describe what's going to be happening, whilst not leading anyone up the garden path, what's, you know, potentially unethical. So anyway, that's how I kind of feel.
Yeah, very good point. Because in that moment, in some situations, if greed starts to enter to our mind, and people are offering money, for example, maybe some people can fall into the temptation and say, okay, I will send energy tomorrow and pass me these dollars or whatever, right? So it's very important to understand that we can design our language in such a way that we show our intention in the most clear way. But we know, in your experience, in my experience as well, people will understand based not just in our intention. Sometimes people want to believe, right? And in a way, this mysterious experience is kind of a proof, right? So we need to be very careful about what is our position into that situation, because I am sure that your show was phenomenal and the mind reading was very credible, because that happens, right? And in my experience, that also happens. So when it starts to happen, I take the conscious decision of say, okay, what is my point of this? So obviously, I am not someone that is offering that service, but how can I maintain the harmony, right? Because as you said, sometimes we feel that the psychological type of approach is more ethical than the intuitive or psychic approach. But at the end, we need to realize that we can find congruency, no matter which is the approach of our performance or our subtext in how we accomplish that. I think that if we are congruent, we don't need to lie, right? And I think that that's also very important in all mystery performance, that deception, the fooling aspect is so part of our language. But that's not fooling. I am a deception artist and whatever. And I think that we need to go into the other polarization, to understand that no, we can be honest with what we do. And it's not about saying, okay, I'm using the blink case, or it's not about that. It's about understanding that what we do is a human expression, an artistic expression, and we can conversate, we can create conversation with our audience in such a way that we don't need to pretend, right? And
Well,
in the moment, yeah,
sometimes we don't want to fall. The goal is
yeah,
not to fall,
yeah,
because if people can, especially a process, an apparent process of what you're, let's say we're reading poker tells, yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's what's to be fooled about that. It's a skill you're demonstrating that people could say, well, this, I understand how this works,
yeah,
and it's built upon genuine psychology. But it's theatre as well. There is a trick to
yeah,
it, but it
exactly.
makes sense. I mean, who are we really to question or to make anybody change their beliefs? If this lady, she has a right to think that I am, you
Exactly.
know,
Yeah,
in hindsight, when I look back, she has the right. Who am I to
yeah,
tell her not?
yeah,
Just for me being truthful,
yeah,
that's, you know, do you then ask yourself, okay, should you have been truthful? Well, yes, because from my point of view, my conscience is clear. If that's a very inward, selfish way of thinking about it.
yeah,
But from her point of view, that might have just been an emotional slap in the face.
yeah,
At the time I made the call to tell the truth. And I don't know what the fallout of that is, because I've never seen the lady again. But right now, do you know what I mean? Who was I to tell her that? And
exactly.
I think from the basis of a good person trying to do the right thing, that's what I did, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
of
didn't
course.
want you to give her false hope if she
Mm.
thought that I was doing this. Maybe there is somebody who does this without my gimmickry and
Yeah,
they could help. Who am I to tell you that they don't exist? But for
yeah,
me, I can't rock up with my mark deck and my little dice and make things better. I think that's
yeah,
the point
yeah,
I was trying to do in the most respectful of ways.
yeah, yeah. I think that the ethics in mentalism are a little bit confused, because sometimes we feel that ethics is all about telling people that we do things that we can't do, something like that. But truly, the ethics, the ethical conduct and behavior in any type of practice is about understanding your role and how you will conduct yourself in such a way that you are keeping the ethics of that discipline. And also, in another part of my experience as a psychologist, I normally receive some very weird comments, right? And it's not just in mentalism or in magic. No, it's a kind of any type of profession in which you can deal with people, especially with these mind perceptions type of experiences. And sometimes people ask me if I do, as a psychologist, not as a performer, as a psychologist, if I do some type of ritual or witchcraft, right? So people again understand words with their own basis of language. And for some people, psychologist even means like of kind of a therapist, metaphysical therapist, right? And there are some performers or some professionals that do that. It's the freedom of each person, but we need to be very attentive in the ethics of our own practice as performers. So if that situation emerges about contacting the people or whatever, we can have an honest reply in such a way that we can continue this harmonic interaction. We don't need to offend someone. Our paradigm in mentalism is not superior than anyone. And even, as you said, this type of conversations and dynamics can be very spiritual in nature. But if we expect that, if we have attachment to that, we will not only create suffering for us, because most probably we will not do it, because why, right? It's not the goal. The goal is mystery, right? And if someone wants to perceive it as a cool trick, fine with me. If someone wants to feel it like a memorable moment of inspiration, fine, right? And the most important is to do it with excellence, do it with a clear intention. And in my experience, I am understanding mentalism not even as a goal. mentalism for me is a channel of artistic communication, of possibilities, right? Thanks to the techniques that we have, we can create telepathic experience, right? It's crazy. So I feel that for me, mentalism is kind of a channel of communication in which we can accentuate the conversation with something that is beautiful and mysterious, like mind reading or precognition or energies or anything. But if we go beyond the mentalism aspect end goal, and we can understand that, yeah, we can kind of create these experiences of deeper interaction, maybe, or deeper focus even, right? Then when we are performing, we are asking people the phrase of David Blaine in his first special, look, watch, right? Look, watch, pay attention, be attentive. And we are kind of facilitating this experience of humanness, right? Humanness is about being focused, and in this modern society we are so distracted. So I feel that even with that type of goal in performance, to invite people to focus, to enjoy the experience, to take it as they want, but without imposing any type of view, I think it's even more fun, right? It's more relaxed in a way.
Yeah, I always say that mentalism creates possibilities, and those
Yeah,
possibilities are endless. You know what
yeah,
we hear it all the time, like you are limited just by your imagination. It's a cliche, but when you really stop to think about it, your imagination isn't other people's imagination. You don't look at what is out there beforehand. Because I remember Alex McClear saying an agent once spoke to him about hiring him for an event, and when he said it was a mentalist, she said, "Oh yeah, I know you guys. You are the guys that stand on the stage and you have people do drawings and you give them back." And that just blew my mind. I was like, "What?" So, I, unlimited by your imagination is like, what do you want to do with it? It's endless. You can create anything. You don't have to create what you think you have to create. And I've been guilty of that. I've created something because I've seen other people create something that looks like way. That must be the thing that we're doing right now. And then a year later, the tastes change, and now we're all got Rubik's cubes, or
yeah,
it's flavors and tastes. But realistically, when you stop and think about what a specific technique can produce and facilitate, it can literally create endless possibilities. But that can only come from within the creator. So, like for me, if I buy something, yes, I read the instructions, but I don't want to read or experience the presentation of it, because I know as soon as I do, the moment I do, I'm inspired by it. In that
yeah,
you can't. It's difficult to disassociate yourself from the prop with the routine. So I always like to go off first before I come back to see, did I go in the same direction? Did I, and I think I would like to see more mentalists, and I appreciate not everyone's a creative. The strengths don't always lie in being creative, but I think we've all got an innate ability to stop and think about, what is our story? As a human, we've all got a story. We can always tell somebody something about us, which then we become human to them. Because if not, we're just a statistic. We look at people, we don't really pay attention to what's going on inside that person's head, their emotional baggage, their experience in life. But if we do stop just for a minute to listen, then we realize how connected we all are. And the
yeah,
problem is, there's not enough of that kind of thinking, I think, amongst the general population of people that buy tricks.
yeah,
It can be frustrating, but I mean, at the same time, we're also in a fortunate position where if people are going to buy our material, they also listen to us. So we have a soapbox, we have an opportunity
yeah,
to teach. I mean, I know I say it nearly every time I talk to someone. I used to be a teacher, but I think it's very important. The ability to teach, and you'll know this more than anyone with your work, is so important. But not necessarily from an ego point of view, but in order from an awakening point of view, for the person inside of their own mind to think, you know what, I've got something to say. I've got something to do here, and I know I can make it mine. And I think if anyone approaches their magic, their mentalism with that mindset, you've already half the battle won. Do you know what I mean? Because you're doing something different. And I think I applaud and take my hat off to you if you're doing it that way. So
Yeah, beautiful words, my friend. And I am sure that we can talk and talk, but now our audience in YouTube and in Mentalism Center who is watching this video, they need to do something else. So go perform and enjoy mentalism. And thanks, Luch, for your time. Thanks for your inspiration, your ideas, and anything else that you want to add before we end the conversation.
It always feels that awkward moment where you feel like you've got to plug something. But realistically, I mean, you know, a lot of people aren't really aware that I self-release all my products. And you can find out about that on my website, which is Read My Mind Limited. So the website is readmymind.co.uk. Obviously, we're on all the social media channels, and it's the only outlet that I release my material on now. So, you know, sign up to the newsletter, find out about what we're doing over there. And there's going to be a real interesting sort of, we're at a crossroads at the moment now where a lot of the stuff what we've been talking about today, Pablo, is going to come to fruition for me. I'm going to, because I've moved away from teaching, I'm going to step back into teaching, but within mentalism. And I want to,
Nice.
I want to not just be the guy that releases material, but I also want to try and create some kind of interactive community where we are focusing on learning. That's where I'm going to go. So lots of lives, lots of chats, lots of opportunities for you, for friends, for everyone really to get involved. Just to, we're not governed, are we, by anybody in mentalism? So I think, you know, there needs to be some kind of outlets where people can talk and have their say and learn core skills. And everybody, I mean, I need to brush up on things. I'm sure there's areas that you maybe neglect or have not tuned as much as you want to. So I think as long as the mindset is that we're a student for life, you know, that's the kind of thing that I want to sort of progress and talk about a little bit more. And hopefully get people on board with. I really want to fine tune people's core skills, let's just say, to give them that own, it's what we talked about, give them that own ability to say, do you know what, I do have something to say and I can create something that is me, that is magical and that is mysterious. So that's where I'm going to be going over the next few years.
Yeah, so the Authenticity Academy of Luch and his friends.
Oh dear. Well, thank you for having me on, mate. I really,
of course, my friend. Yeah. Stay in touch and see you soon. Thank you, everyone who's watching.
Bye bye.